people were really careful around him. And it's not that he was throwing fits and kicking over C-stands and throwing boxes around or anything. And I just realized that other people weren't engaging with him.
Hollywood's golden age is often remembered as a time of glamour, stars, and unforgettable films. But beneath the spotlight, a far darker story was unfolding. One of silence, power abuse, and devastation hidden behind charismatic faces.
There was a point where he was delusional and having kind of episodes that were related, and it was unsustainable.
What if some of the most beloved legends were living double lives, wielding charm as a mask for cruelty? Imagine the very actors who shaped America's dreams also destroying lives behind closed doors, shielded by their fame and influence. This is not a tale of fiction, but a harsh reality Ron Howard has courageously exposed. Their true stories challenge everything we think we know about celebrity and power, revealing the price paid in silence and fear. Hollywood's dark facade. The golden age of Hollywood wore a dazzling mask of glamour and dreams. But behind that radiant facade lay shadows few dared to confront. It was an era that built icons and legacies, yet secretly thrived on silence and cruelty. The very studios that elevated stars often turned a blind eye to the darker truths lurking behind their public images. Fame granted a dangerous kind of immunity, allowing those in the spotlight to operate beyond consequences. This hidden world was a place where power corrupted and fear silenced victims. Behind the velvet ropes and red carpets, stories of abuse, intimidation, and exploitation circulated quietly, rarely breaking into public view. The industry's machinery protected its golden idols, safeguarding reputations at any cost. For decades, these realities remained locked away, preserving an illusion crafted for the masses. Ron Howard, having grown up inside this world, recognized the fragility of this illusion early on. What disturbed him most was how well the industry concealed its darkest chapters, a system designed to reward brilliance while excusing devastating behavior. The silence was a form of complicity that allowed patterns of abuse to persist. To understand Hollywood's golden age fully, one must look beyond the screen and into the shadows. The contradiction between public adoration and private misconduct was stark. Stars who inspired millions also left a trail of broken lives and shattered trust behind the scenes. Yet, the truth rarely reached beyond the industry's inner circle. The culture of silence was so pervasive that even those who bore witness often felt powerless to speak out. This climate created a breeding ground for abuse disguised as charm or genius. This paradox haunts Hollywood's past and challenges its legacy today. What questions linger about the cost of fame and the price paid by those silenced? How could such darkness thrive alongside so much beauty and success? These tensions set the scene for revealing the stories Ron Howard has bravely brought to light. Stories that complicate the myths we hold about some of cinema's greatest figures. While the faces of that era remain iconic, the truth calls for a reckoning. The next chapters will uncover the contradictions embodied by those who captivated audiences but wrought havoc behind closed doors. Their stories are not merely cautionary tales, but mirrors reflecting a deeper failure of power and protection. What looks like star power on the surface often concealed the opposite. These revelations unsettle the comfortable narratives that Hollywood once offered. They remind us that evil can wear 1,000 faces, and sometimes it smiles the brightest. The Golden Age may have built dreams, but it also harbored monsters in plain sight. The name of Errol Flynn was among the first to shatter this fragile fantasy. From the charming rogue to the menacing reality behind the smile, Errol Flynn's story lays bare the potent mix of allure and danger that defined much of Hollywood's darker side. Errol Flynn's hidden predation. Errol Flynn was Hollywood's embodiment of swashbuckling charm and daring adventure, thrilling audiences with his on-screen bravado. Born in Tasmania in 1909, he captured hearts with films like Captain Blood in 1935, becoming an overnight sensation. The studio system built an empire around his charisma, creating the perfect image of a reckless hero destined for greatness. But beneath that polished exterior, a far more disturbing character thrived. Flynn's private life was marked by arrogance, addiction, and predatory behavior that contrasted sharply with his romanticized reputation. By the early 1940s, accusations against him began to surface, shaking the industry to its core. Two teenage girls, Peggy Satterlee and Betty Hansen, filed charges of statutory indecent assault in 1942, exposing a grim truth hidden behind Flynn's smile. The trial captivated the nation, polarizing public opinion and revealing the dark underbelly of Hollywood's protective veil. Flynn's reaction was daring and non-compliant at the same time. He openly made fun of the accusations in court and defended himself with the help of his celebrity and his eloquence. Warner Brothers did not spare any effort in the course of the trial. They hired the best lawyers and set up an elaborate scheme to undermine the credibility of the accusers. Studio heads even took the extreme measure of paying some witnesses to go underground, thereby making sure Flynn would be acquitted. This entire orchestration was a clear sign of how much Hollywood is willing to do in order to keep its stars. Nevertheless, the acquittal did not significantly reduce his wild behavior. The private letters, which were made public after 30 years or so, revealed Flynn bragging uncaringly about his sexual encounters and expressing contempt for the people who were scared of him. He was riding high on his reputation as a rogue while actually doing real harm in private. Ron Howard considers this case a turning point, when he got the idea of the industry protecting the offenders behind a facade of charm and popularity. The life of Flynn was nothing but chaos, with substance dependency and extravagance as the main factors. Alcohol and coke were his main substances, and his finances went down in no time. His body was only 50 years old when it finally died. It faced heart failure and other complications that were lifestyle-related. In a way, his death was like a reflection of his life, taking everything but not giving anything that would last. His tale was a striking example of the breakdown of morals in Hollywood, exposing how the seductive could be despicable and the guilty could be the lucky ones because of fame. The deceased icon of Flynn is a hard but necessary confrontation with the very high price that one pays when idolizing the stars without the complete and accurate truth. His image makes us aware of the dark aspect of the industry, where the brightest lights very often shield the most hideous secrets. Flynn's tale made a loud impact that lasted throughout Hollywood's golden period and affected the whole power and cover-up dynamics in the film industry. It created a scary condition that was later repeated in other scandals involving different project legends. Enlightening the contradictions of Flynn's character is indispensable to understanding the silencing patterns that have been unveiled by Ron Howard. As we move deeper into this world, the next figure's story reveals another layer of conflict, where on-screen heroism and off-screen darkness collide in a tempest of rage and fear. Kirk Douglas's violent temper. Kirk Douglas was a towering figure in Hollywood, a star celebrated for his portrayals of honor and justice. Born Isar Daniel Danilovich in 1916 to immigrant parents, he rose from poverty through sheer determination, culminating in iconic roles like Spartacus. Yet, behind the camera, those who worked with Douglas recalled a far more troubling side, one defined by volatility and intimidation. Described by crew members as impossible to please, Douglas carried a temper that could explode unpredictably. His demands went beyond professional rigor. They extended to a need for domination over everyone around him. Actress Deborah Paget remarked that he didn't just want to own a scene, he wanted to dominate every person in it. This controlling nature instilled fear and discomfort on many sets. Ron Howard, who studied Douglas's films early in his career, recognized a deeper turmoil behind that intense gaze. He described it as a rage under that smile, the kind that eats a person alive. This anger haunted Douglas throughout his life, shaping both his image and his relationships. It was a force that no amount of talent or fame could tame. Controversies involving Douglas extended beyond temperamental outbursts. Whispers of his involvement in the 1950s assault of a teenage Natalie Wood, repeated by the actress's sister years later, added layers of darkness to his legacy. Though never charged, the allegations were suppressed by Hollywood's machinery, a pattern repeated with many powerful men of the era. On set, Douglas's presence was both inspiring and terrifying. Director Stanley Kubrick called him the most driven and hardest-to-control actor he had ever worked with. This duality reflected the paradox of Douglas's career, a man who commanded respect but also bred fear. Ron Howard saw in Douglas a lesson about how unchecked power becomes destructive. The Oscar Douglas accepted in 1996 was viewed by some as a moment of peace, but Howard saw it differently. It was the final act of a performer who had spent his life running from demons he never fully confronted. Beneath the applause lay an uncomfortable truth that Hollywood preferred to ignore. Douglas's complex legacy serves as a reminder that brilliance and terror can coexist. His story is a mirror reflecting Hollywood's willingness to excuse behavior as long as talent remains intact. In examining his life, the industry's reckoning with power and accountability grows ever more urgent. As the demand for control and domination continues, another Hollywood legend reveals how cruelty can take on a colder, more calculating form. Faye Dunaway's reign of terror. Faye Dunaway was Hollywood's embodiment of icy allure and artistic brilliance, rising rapidly to stardom with iconic roles in films like Bonnie and Clyde and Chinatown. To the public, she was untouchable, an enigmatic queen of cinema whose presence commanded the screen. But behind that shimmering surface lay a reign of cruelty marked by control and intimidation. To Ron Howard, Dunaway exemplifies how Hollywood evil doesn't always come with violence. Sometimes it is colder, manifesting in emotional manipulation and relentless domination. Crew members who worked with Dunaway whispered tales of tantrums and abuses of power that made sets fearful places. Her endless demands and merciless treatment of assistants turned professional environments into battlegrounds. Rutanya Alda, her co-star in Mommy Dearest, recalled a palpable tension as everyone braced for Dunaway's next explosive outburst. The film, about abuse and cruelty, tragically mirrored Dunaway's own behavior, blurring the line between character and actor. Director Frank Perry once confessed he considered quitting a project because of Dunaway's violent mood swings. She reportedly threw objects, screamed at makeup artists, and at times refused to film unless conditions flattered her perfectly. Such episodes went beyond diva behavior. They were acts of emotional terrorism, creating chaotic and suffocating atmospheres for cast and crew alike. Ron Howard later cited her as a stark example of how a hunger for control can morph into a source of real fear. The turmoil extended beyond isolated outbursts. On the set of The Wicked Lady, Dunaway allegedly slapped a cameraman and spat on a crew member, actions that stunned those present. On Don Juan de Marco, production ground to a halt after Dunaway humiliated her assistant so severely that they could no longer function. Her former manager, Jay Bernstein, remarked that Dunaway didn't just play divas, she became them, embodying cruelty as a persona on and off screen. By the 2000s, her reputation for unmanageability caught up with her. Directors grew reluctant to cast her, and calls for her involvement in projects dwindled. After being fired from a Broadway revival of Tea at 5 in 2011, Dunaway blamed everyone but herself, refusing to confront the growing consensus around her behavior. When asked about her legacy, Ron Howard gave a measured but biting assessment. She had chased perfection so hard that she lost compassion along the way. Dunaway's downfall was not sudden. It was a slow unraveling marked by isolation and eroded goodwill. The once revered star found herself shunned, even at retrospectives celebrating her films. For Howard, her story was a cautionary tale, a clear example that talent without empathy eventually destroys not just others, but oneself. Her career stands as a somber reminder that unchecked ego and cruelty can poison even the brightest brilliance. Power in Hollywood often comes wrapped in layers of charisma and talent, yet Dunaway's legacy demonstrates the corrosive effects when kindness gives way to domination. She represented the darker side of desire for control, a toxicity hiding behind beauty and skill. Her story challenges audiences to reconsider how power is wielded behind the scenes and what price is paid by those caught in its grip. As Dunaway's cold cruelty faded from the spotlight, the stage was set for another legend whose fierce image concealed a harsher truth. A man whose ideology shaped Hollywood as much as his films. John Wayne's tyranny. John Wayne was Hollywood's towering symbol of rugged American masculinity, the fearless cowboy, the soldier, the embodiment of traditional values. To millions, he was the personification of heroism and strength. But to Ron Howard, who grew up watching Wayne on television, the truth beneath that persona was far darker. Wayne was the bully behind the myth, a man who wore his patriotism like armor for intolerance and control. Born Marion Morrison in 1907 in Iowa, Wayne rose through the studio system by projecting an unshakable image of masculinity rooted in strength and authority. By the 1950s, he was more than an actor. He was an ideology. He conflated dissent with weakness and saw social progress as betrayal. On film sets, his rule was one of rigid intimidation. Technicians who fell short of his expectations were publicly berated. Fellow actor Christopher Mitchum recalled, "When Duke was angry, the air froze. Compliance was mandatory. Resistance meant exile." Wayne's cruelty extended well beyond the confines of the set. He was notorious for publicly belittling women, mocking indigenous actors on Western film productions, and dismissing black performers who challenged stereotypes. His infamous 1971 Playboy interview remains a disturbing testament to his views, where he disparaged Native Americans as selfish, questioned black people's readiness for self-governance, and declared films needed men, not whiners. The interview ignited outrage decades later for its raw display of racist and reactionary beliefs. On the set of The Searchers, Wayne clashed bitterly with director John Ford over Wayne's insistence that his character, Ethan Edwards, a racist and vengeful Confederate, be shown in a sympathetic light. Ford pushed back against romanticizing such cruelty, but Wayne refused to relent. The final film preserved the character's brutal nature, but also revealed the actor's contempt beneath the performance. Ron Howard, who studied that role at USC, described it as terrifying, unable to discern where the character ended and the man began. Even as he faced physical decline during his final years, weakened by cancer, Wayne refused to apologize for his divisive views or actions. He dismissed critics as weak and blamed a changing culture for his perceived isolation. He died in 1979 at the age of 72, revered by many as an American icon. Yet filmmakers like Ron Howard see his story as a cautionary tale, proof that power built on prejudice does not mature into wisdom but festers into bitterness. The myth of John Wayne has endured, but the man behind the legend never deserved the pedestal. His legacy challenges us to separate Hollywood's heroic veneer from the realities of cruelty and intolerance that sometimes underpin it. Wayne's story serves as a stark reminder that greatness in art does not excuse moral failures in character, and that history must reckon with both. As Hollywood's golden age gave way to new voices and changing values, this toxic blend of power, prejudice, and control continued to cast shadows over the industry's brightest legends. The unfolding narratives reveal not only individual failings, but systemic problems that allowed darkness to flourish behind the camera. From Wayne's ruthless dominance, we encounter a troubling fusion of celebrity and ideology that shaped stories both on screen and off. The next accounts will uncover how this toxic legacy was further complicated by artistic genius turned to devastating use. Roman Polanski's escape and hypocrisy. Roman Polanski's name is synonymous with both cinematic genius and moral controversy, a stark reminder of how talent can mask darkness. Born in 1933 in Paris to Polish parents and a survivor of Nazi occupation, Polanski's early life was shaped by tragedy and resilience. His breakthrough films, including Knife in the Water and Rosemary's Baby, established him as a visionary director skilled at turning paranoia into art. Yet the unsettling themes of his movies were reflections of deeper personal demons. In March 1977, Polanski's carefully cultivated image unraveled when he was arrested for sexually assaulting a 13-year-old girl named Samantha Gailey after a photo shoot at Jack Nicholson's Los Angeles home. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he pleaded guilty to unlawful sex with a minor. Before sentencing, Polanski fled the United States, escaping to France, where he has since lived in exile. This flight split Hollywood, as some condemned him while others defended him as a tortured artist. For a young Ron Howard, then beginning his filmmaking career, this moment was a devastating lesson in the industry's moral contradictions. Howard remembered how people discussed Polanski's art, while the life of a child was irreparably broken. The case became one of Hollywood's greatest stains, a glaring example of a system that protected creative genius at the expense of victims. Polanski continued making films abroad, winning an Academy Award in 2003 for The Pianist, a moment Howard described as surreal and deeply troubling. When Polanski accepted his Oscar, Howard refused to stand, haunted by the girl's shattered life and what applause must sound like through her pain. Decades later, he remains incensed at the industry's willingness to separate artistic achievement from personal guilt. Polanski's 2020 César Award in France prompted protests and walkouts, symbolizing overdue but incomplete justice. To Howard, it took the world 40 years simply to say what should have been said the day after the crime. Monsters do not become less monstrous because they frame a shot well. Polanski, in Europe, still enjoys the privilege of being free among the untouchables. But at the same time, his past still bothers him. The term hypocrisy has become synonymous with his name, the representative figure of Hollywood's obstinate belief that high-ranking people never get punished. To put it another way, Polanski's life story is the very image of the era's downfall, a society that grants the artist a pardon while the victim suffers. Howard, pessimistically, expressed it that Hollywood's motto is to forgive everything as long as the lighting is good. The whole affair was a scandal of such great proportions that it not only revealed but also magnified the deep divisions in the film community regarding their morals and values. And at the same time, it initiated a whole dialogue about the extent to which power and talent can come to someone's rescue, even when they indulge in the worst behavior. Polanski's exile was not merely a personal banishment. It turned into a symbol of the whole industry, which is in collusion with the actors, the abusers, among others, and is, therefore, never so concerned with the truths and the healings. To put it in another way, Polanski's talent as a filmmaker cannot be separated from the crime he committed and the ensuing trial that was unfortunately aborted. For a lot of people, Polanski's liberation is a harsh reminder of justice that has been delayed for a long time, but is still there in the background. An artist's life and work eventually confront society with the tough questions of genius and moral obligation. In Hollywood's intricate world, where one might find the collision of the two extremes of admiration and condemnation, Polanski is still the very person. As this legacy of betrayal and hypocrisy unfolds, the next story reveals another figure whose bright smile concealed deep and destructive darkness. Mickey Rooney's Mask of Misery. Mickey Rooney was Hollywood's first true child superstar, an all-American boy whose infectious grin made him a beloved figure across screens nationwide. Born Joseph Ewell Jr. in 1920, he dominated MGM's musicals, quickly becoming the highest-paid actor by the age of 18. His early life seemed charmed, filled with song, dance, and endless adoration. But beneath that cheerful mask lay a life marked by turmoil, bitterness, and cruelty. Though Rooney appeared to embody joy, those close to him saw a far darker side. His personal life was riddled with scandals: 8 marriages, countless affairs, gambling losses, and betrayals of those who loved him. Ava Gardner once described him as the shortest man with the biggest ego in the world. Behind closed doors, his charm gave way to volatility and emotional cruelty, fracturing relationships and sowing pain. In his later years, the abuse Rooney suffered became a tragic mirror of the pain he inflicted on others. His 8th wife and stepson were accused in 2011 of elder abuse and financial manipulation, draining Rooney's resources and isolating him from family and friends. Yet decades before, former colleagues whispered stories of his cruel and unpredictable behavior on set. Judy Garland, his closest friend during their MGM years, said privately that Rooney could make you laugh one moment and destroy you the next. Garland, herself emotionally broken by studio pressures, hinted that Rooney shared blame for her suffering, revealing a web of toxicity that extended beyond executives. Rooney's career spiraled downward in the 1960s, as addiction, bankruptcy, and scandal chased him relentlessly. In a 1979 interview, he claimed to have lived 1,000 lives. Yet Ron Howard later reflected that Rooney seemed to have lived them all for himself, with little regard for those around him. Even in advanced age, Rooney's bitterness deepened. He blamed everyone, the studios, his wives, even God, for his misfortunes. His estate was worth less than $20,000 when he died in 2014 at the age of 93. Initially unclaimed, his body was eventually buried modestly in Los Angeles after friends raised funds for a funeral. The fall from child star to forgotten and isolated man was as dramatic as it was tragic. For Ron Howard, Rooney's story completed a troubling pattern seen throughout Hollywood's golden age. The smiles that dazzled audiences often concealed immense loneliness and despair. Rooney made the world laugh while he was quietly dying inside. This, Howard said, might be the saddest kind of evil. Pain turned into performance, unnoticed by those it touched most deeply. Rooney's life serves as a somber coda to an era rife with contradictions. How youthful promise can give way to personal ruin, and how fame can both uplift and destroy. His legacy challenges us to look beyond the surface of celebrity and to acknowledge the human cost hidden in the spotlight's glare. In these stories of cruelty, power, and isolation, the Golden Age's shine dims, revealing monsters not from horror movies, but those protected, nurtured, and often ignored by the very industry that worshipped them. Hollywood's reckoning and silence. Hollywood's golden age was built on illusions of glamour, talent, and grandeur. But the darker legacies revealed by Ron Howard peel back a grimmer reality. Behind the roaring applause and bright lights lurked a culture of silence, exploitation, and complicity. Powerful stars, protected by studios and fans alike, were often shielded from accountability, allowing harmful behavior to fester unchecked. This systemic failure left deep scars not only on victims, but on the industry's moral fabric. The stories of Errol Flynn, Kirk Douglas, Faye Dunaway, John Wayne, Roman Polanski, and Mickey Rooney illustrate patterns that transcended individual failings. Each figure, in their own way, benefited from a machinery that prioritized celebrity over conscience. Their abuses, whether through cruelty, violence, or manipulation, were often dismissed or hidden in favor of preserving reputations and profits. For decades, this culture allowed predators to thrive behind a veil of charm and brilliance. Ron Howard's willingness to name these figures decades later represents a moment of reckoning, a challenge to confront Hollywood's uncomfortable truths. It is a reminder that fame and talent do not excuse wrongdoing, nor should they shield wrongdoers from consequences. The Golden Age's shine diminishes when faced with the reality of broken lives behind the scenes. Howard's reflections call upon audiences to reconsider how stories are told and whose voices go unheard in the shadows. This situation also sheds light on the great cost that victims, those who have been silenced by fear, coercion, and a protective system, have to pay. Victims, who were often powerless against the studios and the star power, had their sufferings silenced or ignored. The emotional and psychological injuries lasted much longer than the public scandals, and gave a glimpse of how deep and how long the wounds in Hollywood are. It is an absolute necessity to confront this pain in order to put an end to the cycles of abuse and silence. The slow progress of the industry in dealing with the problem is, however, somewhat compensated by changing attitudes and more demands for transparency today. Movements demanding accountability have partly emerged as a reaction to the histories that Ron Howard mentions. Still, the gap between the past and the present highlights the power dynamics that allow misconduct to go on. Hollywood's legacy is still tied up with privilege and secrecy, which means that vigilance and courage are needed not only from the insiders, but also from the audiences. The paradox of idolization and fear has also been highlighted by these tales. Legendary movie stars, who were awarded for their acting skills, were usually feared during filming. Fear was not a natural occurrence, but rather a weapon that was used to control and intimidate. This interplay resulted in a tone where the quiet would be eradicated and the abusers would be protected, thus complicating the maintenance of artistic collaboration and humane workplaces. The audience now has to deal with the question of whether it is possible to separate admiration from accountability and how cultural narratives shape collective memory. The dismantling of the Golden Age's myths is a prerequisite to the introduction of the complex, often painful realities that are, of course, hidden under the illusory world of captivating performances. It is only then that the film industry will have a chance of evolving into a more just and humane future. Ron Howard's rise in pitch is both a sign of the witness and the advocate. It is a call to see the darkness where there is light. The Maverick is forcing Hollywood and its audience to unmask and face the pasts that are not so pleasant. There is the opportunity for healing, reformation, and a legacy that is not covered by darkness and brutality, but rather a legacy that is clear and bright. The golden age of Hollywood shimmers with legend, but conceals painful truths about power and cruelty. Ron Howard's revelations urge us to see beyond glamour and honor the voices too long silenced. If you found this eye-opening, please like and subscribe for more stories that unpack the realities behind the myths.